All right.
How about if I just start at the beginning? you could be honest.
Because you know what? They have the sweat equity that went into that memory that they're making with their friends and family. And that's what's important with this. And that's what the I Am Real world's about.
Well, that's a great question. You know, one of the best things about a spring food plot is you get a second chance if it fails.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins. Brought to you by Biofarm.com, your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. By tapping into Don's years of experience, dedication, and commitment, Chasing Giants focuses on the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails. Now, here is Don and co-host Terry Peer.
Well, welcome everyone to Chasing Giants, episode 37, brought to you by Biofarm.com. Don Higgins is on the line. How you doing, Don?
I'm great. How are you, Terry?
I'm doing good. Where has time gone? It's already middle of November. We're through peak rut in lockdown, and man, the season's going by quick, it seems like.
Yeah, it is. And, this November has been something else. We had a great October with cooler than normal temperatures, but the rut has been, we had the heat there at the beginning of November, and then we get into the lockdown phase.
Yeah, and that's really where we're at right now. You've been hunting almost every day and at least publishing a little bit of insight that you see on your rut report. And as usual, a bunch of people aren't looking at it to understand a big perspective. They want to argue based on one deer or what. So over the last week, let's even back up to where we had the warm weather. Why don't you talk a little bit in summary about how we've kind of gone through this last week to where we are right now, from peak rut when we had really, really warm temperatures into this lockdown phase that we're currently in.
Yeah, I can just tell by some of the responses to the rut report that there's some hunters that don't have a good understanding of the rut, and so, the rut is the entire breeding season. There's different phases of the rut, different periods of the rut, but the rut itself is the entire breeding season, if you will, or at least that's the way I've always looked at it. So, early in November, the does for the most part are not in heat. And the bucks are ready. So the bucks, they're working scrapes heavy and they're on their feet cruising, looking for does. And that's what you call the seeking or chasing phase. And then when the does start coming into heat like they have, the mature bucks get with those does for the most part. And that's called the lockdown phase because that hot doe, she's going to have usually one or more mature bucks with her, but she's also liable to have, a half a dozen bucks with her. I mean, just a couple of days ago, I seen a doe that had 4 bucks with her out in a wide open harvested cornfield, nowhere near where you would expect to typically see deer. I seen another doe tonight that had a mature buck with her, nowhere near where you'd expect deer to be, just out in a wide open field. But I think what happens a lot of times is a guy goes deer hunting and I'm saying it's the lockdown phase, and he's in his stand and he sees a mature buck going by, and he thinks, no, they're cruising, they're seeking, they're looking for does. Well, that mature buck is not going to be with a hot doe 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He's going to, breed one doe, be with her about 24 to 36 hours, and then he's moving on looking for his next one. And it's that period between hot does is when the bucks are still cruising, but that's usually at this time of the year, it's a very short-lived phase. He doesn't have to look that long and that hard to find his next hot doe. So you can't just base what's going on one observation.
Right.
And what I'm relating here is basically years of observation over multiple properties, and every buck's not going to be doing the same thing. It's just like every buck is not going to be standing up feeding at the same time, in the late season, whenever they get on the the food sources. So
Right.
you kind of got to look at the big picture, and I think a lot of people make comments without looking at the big picture.
Well, I want to pick your brain a little bit about especially different things that we can look at for lockdown phases, kind of identifying, what period, because some people down in the South, they might be a little bit behind us, or different areas see different things. I brought Jonathan, my 15-year-old son. I still, since October, when I said that youth rifle weekend, I still have not been hunting for me yet. I've been trying to get him tagged out, and we ended up coming up to your place and trying to kill a management deer. Came up Thursday night, and for a 15-year-old kid, he toughed it out. He sat in the blind with me all day. We were there almost 12 hours, and then hunted Friday morning. One of the things that I noticed on your place is how many fawns were by themselves feeding.
Yep.
We saw a ton of fawns. So is that an indication that those bucks have pushed the mothers off somewhere and have them in lockdown when we see just a bunch of fawns out feeding like normal?
Absolutely. Yep, that's one of the signs for sure. Mama's gone with daddy, and the kids are left home.
Right. So, and I started seeing that on another property up in Illinois, about a week ago. But that was just one of the takeaways I saw at your place, is so many fawns just out by themselves, and not with a doe. Now, will those fawns, after that doe is bred and it's not getting pinned down with a buck, will that fawn and that doe reunite?
Yeah, absolutely. They know each other,
right?
And that doe will return, to her core area, and she'll hook back up with her fawns, and it usually doesn't take that long either.
Well, I'm basically teeing you up for things that we can talk about here that are signs that the lockdown's over, instead of getting a picture of one buck. My phone started buzzing in church today right at the end of the sermon, and I knew it had to be the cell cameras going off, and I didn't check it, and we got to right at the end of the invitation, and I glanced down at my phone and saw what camera it was, and I clicked on it, and I had a picture of a really good mature buck that I don't know on a cell camera. So is looking for does with fawns a better indication of when the lockdown phase is over versus getting that one picture of that mature buck that I got today?
Well, for me, it's more almost a date on the calendar, because, I believe the rut happens the same time every year. And these phases happen the same time each year. I mean, the record books show that, more Boone and Crockett bucks are killed on November 7th than any other date.
Mm-hmm.
The 8th is also a great day. But what happens is the 7th and 8th, those bucks they've worked up to a fever pitch, but yet in most cases, there's not a hot doe yet.
Right.
Now on the 9th, it seems to be the date year after year. Those bucks are starting to hook up with the does by the 9th.
The only problem was that period of time for us, we had pretty much 70 to 80 degree weather everywhere across the Midwest.
Right. So it made that seeking phase very difficult this year, because the deer movement was just not what it would typically be during daylight hours anyway.
So how long does this lockdown period last? I mean, like I said, I got two pictures of bucks midday that are shooter bucks on two different farms. One of them was a video off a cell camera. One of them was a picture off a cell camera. I know people argue with you and take things out of context that says, no, I saw a buck, or they see somebody shot a mature buck on Facebook. From a across the board view, when are we really looking at coming out of this lockdown phase here coming up in the next couple weeks? Well,
so the does really start coming in the heat about the 8th or 9th of November. And for about 2 weeks after that, I mean, I believe that the majority of mature does, not doe fawns, but the majority of the mature does are going to come in heat in that first 2-week period after the 8th or 9th of November. So that puts us, say, about the 23rd. And then after that, there's still going to be a random doe coming in here and there, but they're going to be fewer and further between. So there'll still be some bucks locked down, but what happens is those mature bucks have to spend a lot more time on their feet looking for the next doe between does.
Right.
So that Thanksgiving weekend, Roger Rothar told me years ago, Thanksgiving weekend is the time to kill the giants, because those old mature bucks, they know it's almost over for another year. You know, they just went through the peak of the rut. Those does are getting harder to find, and you know, each time they hook up with a doe, they got to spend more time looking for the next one than they did before.
Right.
And they will do that. Thanksgiving, there was a period of time a few years back, it's probably been 20 years ago now, but I went through 5 consecutive hunting seasons where the biggest buck I seen from a tree stand, each of those 5 seasons, I seen them during Thanksgiving weekend. And there's really something to that. Those giants, a lot of times they don't get too worked up early as the rut's starting. They wait for the action to begin, then they get involved. But at the end, they don't want to stop. They know it's about over for a year, and they really, I mean, that Thanksgiving weekend is a ticket for giants.
Right.
And they're just on their feet searching.
I think there's a couple anomalies in here, and when I was up at your place, we talked about this a little bit. You know, you have a lot of our listeners that are just gun hunters, and I know Kentucky opened up this yesterday. Indiana opened up yesterday. Illinois opens up this coming weekend. So you got a lot of gun hunters that basically missed, or I don't want to say they missed their opportunities, but the conditions weren't good to see a lot of big bucks. Whether it's the way the calendar fell and opening weekend was warm, windy. I know we both, our 2 areas have had 30 to 45 mile an hour winds the last day and a half. Warm weather. I really think a key to this year, and especially for me personally, is going to be late season, that Thanksgiving that you're talking about, or later. That's why I wasn't really worried about coming on home Saturday and not trying to tough it out in this wind. I think that some people might be complaining about opening weekend of gun season not seeing a lot, but if you have food, Thanksgiving through late season could be really dynamite for people.
Absolutely, yep. And I do, and I usually pull in. You know, people talk about these strange bucks showing up during the rut. I don't get strange bucks during the rut. I'm telling you, I got a picture of every buck I see before I see him. Whenever I see a buck for the first time with my own eyes, I've already got pictures of that deer. But during the late season, when food sources get scarce, that's when I have the new bucks show up.
Right. I just, you know, I watch Facebook. You know, we both have quite a bit of friends on Facebook, and everybody posts their pictures on it. I think there was a lot of really good deer killed in October, but it just seems like, I know people were predicting record numbers of kills in Indiana and Kentucky this weekend, but with the warm weather, lockdown, and this wind today, I'm just going to guess that the actual deer harvest numbers opening weekend of Kentucky were probably down because of the weather in this lockdown period. But I think it just goes to show that, you know, a diverse food source, if you're able to put it in, is like your insurance policy, that no matter what happens, you got a good chance of attracting and holding deer. You know, you might have a phenomenal early season and not have to use late season. But, you know, in my case, I had an incident happen in early season, so I'm going to be depending on that. So even if it's not your style of hunting, that diverse food source, I think, is just going to be key. But there has been some big deer killed, but especially around me, I mean, there's only been like 2-3 giants around my local area that I've seen killed. So in the last week. So I think the best hunting is probably yet to come this year. Well,
I think so, for sure. Now, we did have a fantastic October, better than normal, but we sure haven't had a good November. So
Right.
I think there's some great hunting left.
Right.
And a lot of like Thanksgiving weekend, you know, that I was just talking about, that's going to be dependent on weather. If it's hot that weekend, well, you forget it. Those bucks aren't going to cruise that much in daylight, like they will if it's cold.
Yeah.
So
Needs
weather trumps all.
Needs to get that cold weather for those people looking forward to for this coming week. Tuesday's the coldest day, a high 47, low of 25 up in your area. The rest of the week is high in the 50s and 60s and lows in the 40s and 50s. So we got a predominant south wind most of the week. And then the week of Thanksgiving, it's still ways out to really see. But we got a lot of south wind bringing some warmer air up the rest of this month, it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what it's looking here. Next weekend's our gun season, and temperatures are supposed to be well into the 60s.
Yeah. So as far as hunting wise, it was pretty cool. I got to spend time with my son. We came up and stayed at your place, and got to hunt. He got to see the biggest deer on the hoof that he's ever seen. You mentioned that you also saw the same deer in your rut report, but a really good up-and-comer 3-year-old. He got to see it and watch it through the binoculars, so that was cool to see his eyes light up on that one. But we didn't have a shooter within bow range all weekend. This coming week will be the first time that I'm technically hunting without him. I'm going to come back up, it looks like Tuesday night, and hunt Wednesday through the weekend. And he won't be able to come with me, but then come back and home and focus on him again. So I know you had a couple people at your place that killed a couple bucks. Steve Shields shot a dandy.
Yeah, he did. I think last week on the podcast we talked about my niece Sydney and her boyfriend Tyson. Each shot bucks last Saturday and Sunday. Then Steve Shields came up on Wednesday, and I texted him about 3 days ahead of that, and I said, you need to be at my house Wednesday morning because I seen the weather was going to break, and it was going to drop about 30 degrees for the high. And Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, it was supposed to be down in the 30s, which was, a good 25 degrees cooler than it had been. And I said, you need to be at my house Wednesday morning ready to hunt. And he got here late Tuesday night, and Wednesday morning we went out, and we seen several bucks. I forget how many we even seen, but we'd passed a couple. We passed that real good 3-year-old that you was just talking about, and then probably the number one cull buck that I wanted off of the place shows up, and he was down in a creek, and I could see him. Steve and I were in 2 different trees about 15 yards apart, and I could see the buck, but Steve couldn't. And I fished my grunt call out, and I grunted that buck, and he comes right up there. And he was a big old bruiser, 5 years old, 8 points, really heavy palmated main beam. And Steve drilled him. Buck probably ran 100 yards, and we seen where he went down and went right over there. Didn't even have to blood trail him and found him. But so there was, we put down 3 bucks in about 5 days on my place. All, management bucks. And Steve's was definitely the biggest of the bunch. It ended up weighing 238 pounds field dress. So,
well, I know I got a message. I know I got a message from our buddy Brian Teets that does the deer processing that Steve took the buck to, saying how big this deer was that you guys brought down there. So he said it was a bruiser.
And I actually thought it was bigger than that because Mel, the buck I shot, weighed 234 on Brian's scale. And we were taking Steve's buck down. I'm like, this buck's got to be 250 because he's bigger than Mel was. But he only was 238 when we got there. So
yeah, still a bruiser of a buck. So
yeah, no doubt about it.
And it's funny because I remember Steve Shields asking me one time, because he's the photographer, the video producer. And he says, does Don ever smile? in his pictures, and sure enough, the picture that I've seen of him, he's got that scowl on his face. So I gave him some crap about that, and I said, "Hey, I don't want to ever hear you talking about Don not smiling in a trophy shot, because he didn't have it. He didn't have the chiclets showing on that one."
No, he didn't, but he was pretty happy, though, believe me. He was pumped.
Yeah, good deal. He deserves it. He's worked hard for us, so I'm happy for him.
Yep.
I know last week Jonathan and I went hunting Saturday night after rounding up the neighbor's cows, and I've had a couple people ask me about how that ended up. Well, I guess I have to tell everybody that this has been an ongoing problem for about 5+ years. So even back before I started managing the family farm for whitetail, it was, it still is used for agriculture purposes, but there was problems with this specific neighbor's cows getting out, going back to when even my wife's grandfather was still alive, and ruining the garden and doing damage. And it's been a constant battle, and without going into details, it's been heated at certain times, and there's been promises made time after time, and they just never get followed through. Well, it was getting close to dark, and I just went back and ran these cows, and they'd trampled about 2 acres of soybeans as they were grazing in the oats that I double cropped in there. And they'd flipped over one of the feeders and ruined it, and I just had enough. And I didn't talk about it all last podcast, but I was actually trading text messages with my attorney from the blind, trying to figure out what options work. Because 5 years of this, I understand, when people's cows get out, it happens, but just time after time and damage after damage, and never willing to pay for anything to help. Even when I've been willing to even pay for half of the fence on the property line, just nothing ever happened. I will tell everybody that we did start legal action this week, based on how the Kentucky law is written, and with how it's called a cattle at large law that was written in 1950. So we put that in motion this week, and let's just say when he received the first letter, he drove to my attorney's office and was not happy. Only in this country can you be the one that breaks the law, do damage to other people's properties, and then claim that you're the victim. The
guy must be a liberal, is all I can say.
No doubt about it. I'm sure he was an Obama supporter, but it's just ridiculous that I've tried to do I won't say the right thing, but I've tried to work with the guy for all of these years, and finally enough was enough. I'm trying to get my son his first, buck that he can shoulder mount, and, going to depend on that late season food source, and then his stupid cows get out. And by Thursday, we put them back up Sunday night. By Thursday, they were back out again. So he... supposedly he has 10 days to either fix the fence or remove the cows, so he's committed to removing the cows. So he's on the clock. So for all of you wondering how I'm dealing with the cows, I'm not shooting them in the head. A lot of you all have sent me messages and say hamburger and steaks, for a postseason grill out. That's all fun to kind of joke around about, but that creates a whole nother list of potential problems with civil lawsuits. So I'm not going to shoot his cows, but I am going to make him take care of the situation this time. I'm done with it. So,
well, speaking of messages, shift gears here a little bit. Since season is open, the number of text and social media messages and emails and things that I get has just exploded. I'm getting I'm talking anywhere from 50 to 100 different deer hunters every day through one of those options. And I want to address a couple of questions that I just keep getting over and over again. And one of them is on aerial photos. I get people that, they either don't want to pay the consulting fee or don't have the money for it. I understand that. I mean, not everybody can afford it. And I've been as poor as anyone, so I definitely understand. But folks want to send me an aerial of their farm and want me to mark it up or this and that. And I just want to tell everyone that aerial photos are very, very limiting on what they can really tell you. Now, when I go do a consulting visit, I always want to see an aerial of the farm. I just want to see how it lays out. But I think, and I know there's some people out there that charge a fee to mark an aerial of a farm, and I just don't see that as, I don't know, I want to be careful with my words here. I just don't see that as a good or a bargain for the landowner. I just don't think that you're getting the quality of information that you deserve, because it's just impossible. And like I said, every time I go to do a consultation, I look at an aerial, and I'll actually get an idea in my head based off that aerial. And then I go put boots on the ground and walk the property, and I'm telling you, at least 80% of the time, at least 80%, the plan I had in my head when I got there is totally out the window, and I'm doing something 100% different. So I just cannot, in good conscience, take somebody's money to mark an aerial photo, and I just won't do it. So if you're listening to this and you ask me to mark aerials or whatever, please don't take offense to it. I'm not turning you down because I want you to spend the money on a consulting visit. I just don't believe in the quality of the information that can be gained from an aerial, especially to the degree that you would charge somebody for it.
Well, I'm gonna throw something out here just a little bit. With the information that you published on your YouTube channel about the wind, which it doesn't have the most views, but if you go to Chasing Giants with Higgins Outdoors, and I'm pulling it up right now as I'm talking because I want to see how many different Play in the Wind. 32,000 people have watched this. My feeling is you could watch that video and then pull your own aerial, and you already know everything that we would tell you with the information from that aerial after watching that. How I don't even know how long that video is. 16 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so much more to the story that people. I'm not going to say they're taking advantage of people, but it's you just have to make so many assumptions, and topography, it plays so much into it. I mean, I don't get as many as you do, but I get constantly, what would you do here? Here's the aerial. How would you hunt this? Watch that wind video, and that's how you hunt it. We can't tell you any more than that. It's just it's people want. And the funny thing then is then they argue with you based if you do answer them. So I've just gotten to where I don't. Well, I killed a deer in 1986 doing that. Well, so anyway, I fully agree with you. I think that there's people that take money for it, but I'm telling our listeners, if you go to that YouTube channel and you watch that video on hunting the right wind, it's going to answer everything that Don or I could answer from an aerial photo.
Yep.
Because we're just making the assumptions past it.
Right.
It would be it'd be really interesting to, as part of your master class, to pull an aerial of a property and say, how would you hunt it? And then when you actually went out, explain why the people say how they would hunt it would be wrong, just because of how the topography of the property is so much different.
Right.
So
aerials have their place, but they're very limiting in what they can tell you.
They get you part of the way there, but it's not the whole story. That's for sure.
Right.
All right. What I know I get a lot of questions. You gotta get something more than just aerial photos.
Well, another one that really kind of struck home one day this week, I think in one day I either had 3 or 4 different people in the same day tell me that they had shot a deer straight down. The deer was right under them. They shoot straight down into the deer's back. every one of these guys, I don't remember if it was 3 of them or 4 of them, but they all lost their deer. And then they're all texting me or sending me a message wanting to know if I think the deer lives. Well, let's forget whether the deer lived or not. I mean, I know that losing deer is part of bow hunting. But I want to tell you something. I have not lost a deer in over 20 years, probably 25 years. And there's a few reasons for it. First of all, I don't shoot 30 yards is my absolute max. I'm setting up my shots for 15 to 20 yards. Yep. It is extremely rare for me to shoot past 25 yards.
Jonathan was all worried about hunting your place, asking if I was going to range for him. I was like, you don't have to worry about that. No. Everything's going to be a close shot.
Yeah, I mean, I shot Mel at 7 yards. The distance that guys shoot, bow hunting is a close. It's a matter of how close. I like the Barry Wenzel meme that's on social media. Bow hunting is a game of how close, not how far. Right. And so start with the range. Now, these shots I've been talking about are close range, but it's a bad angle. When you got a deer right under you and you're shooting straight down on him, that is a very, very low percentage shot as far as finding that deer.
Right.
Even if you kill him, the odds of you finding him are very slim. And I know why people do it. They get a good buck comes in and they don't see that many good bucks or get that many opportunities, and they think, well, this is the only shot I'm ever going to get. I'm going to take it. Well, what good does it do you to take it if 95% of the time that deer's going to be lost?
Yeah, basically, if you
don't, at least let him live.
If you don't spine that deer, you're only hitting one lung.
And that's in a good scenario,
right? I mean, that's think about it. If you hit the heart, you're going to spine it if he's directly under you. So I mean, it comes down to discipline, and trust me, I get it. When a big buck comes in, the adrenaline goes, and you start panicking. Hey, I get it, but I think that there is a little to be lost in still trying to do the right thing for the animal. I know you guys had you and Corey. You said you all were hunting the other. What was that? Ended up being Saturday morning. And saw one of the target bucks you wanted to shoot and just couldn't get him stopped. So, I mean, you didn't try to force something and risk wounding that deer.
Yeah, and that buck was in range. We just couldn't get him stopped. I've shot 3 or 4 bucks walking, and every time I've shot a walking buck, I've hit him back too far. It's just, I guess, not natural for you to lead him as far as you need to.
Yep.
But I don't even do that anymore. Like I said, I haven't lost a deer in pushing 25 years probably. And it's about getting them close, waiting for the right angle. And then after you make the shot, give them plenty of time. When my niece's boyfriend, Tyson, shot one, a week ago today, we knew the shot was a little bit far back. We watched the buck run off, and then he went out about 100 yards or so from us, and he just stood there and eventually laid down. We snuck out and left and didn't come back. And I knew it was probably a liver hit. We didn't come back for probably 4 hours. And that deer was laying right there dead, right where we'd left him. Now, I know a lot of guys would have probably tried to sneak up and get another arrow in him, but, he jumps up and busts out of there. Your odds of finding that deer just go down big time. So you got to wait after the shot too. But
a lot of times,
these guys shooting them straight down in the back is just crazy.
A lot of times that buck will run out and stop and turn and look right back at you. So if you can't slip out, that deer might lay down where it's at. I mean, he's sitting there watching you, whether or not you can see him or not. Just looking back for movement, thinking, "What in the world was that?" Right? Well, if he sees you getting your backpack done and, cheering around and calling on the cell phone, making noise, he's going to keep going. So, if you can slip out and leave it if you're not sure. Now, if you see him crash. Now, you are the only one that I've ever heard of that shot a 220-inch deer, watched him crash, and went home and took a nap. I will say that.
Well, that was a special situation. Between having grandsons coming to help with the recovery and me having COVID and having no energy whatsoever, You're probably right. There's probably not too many people done that.
So we do appreciate, the interaction with the listeners and the followers of us on social media. I mean, both of us just get a ton of questions and emails. It's the same one as, when people send us a question that says, what should I plant this year for food plots? Well, it's not that we're trying to be difficult. It's not that Don is not wanting to give up secret sauce to get it, instead of coming and paying a consulting job. Neither one of us are going to provide any advice that we're not sure of. And, we're not going to recommend gimmick products for people who offer sponsorships to this podcast, which we've been approached already on. It's kind of just the right thing we think we need to do. And if we can't be sure of something that's going to, work with proven stuff that Don or I have done, we're just not going to talk about it.
Yep, for sure.
So speaking of consultants, what are you booked up yet? Getting close to being booked up, or what?
I'll tell you what, my phone is ringing every single day. I get more people reaching out about consulting. In fact, multiple people every day. I'm going to have to raise my prices at some point. I'm going to try to get through this entire season before I raise them for next year. But I don't know. We get into December, I might have to raise my prices just to slow things down because I'm going to have more than I can handle.
Well, one of the things that helps you keep your prices where it's at is scheduling early. That way you can do multiple jobs on the same trip. In other words, If you have to make 5 trips to Michigan, that's extra cost for fuel and hotels and food and everything. So one of the big things you can do to help Don keep his prices as low as possible is get on the schedule early or on the list early, and then that way he can put a schedule together and knock out multiples in the same trip when he goes different directions.
Right, because usually on these trips I spend a day getting to the state, and then the next morning, I'm doing a consulting visit each day. I might have 3 to 5 or whatever lined up. But then if I come home and I'm headed back to that same state, again, well, there's another day of travel to get there that I've wasted. So I'm trying to be as efficient as possible, but that comes with knowing all your jobs before you go to a place too. So
it lets you plan a whole lot better to be able to to take care of the customers the best you can.
Yeah, and I appreciate everybody calling, no matter when they do. I know that some people don't even consider it until at the end of hunting season. They think, you know what, things didn't go quite what I planned this year. Maybe I should call in some help. So I get that too, and I don't want to discourage anyone, but at the same time, I'm going to be booked up here before long.
Yeah. I know one of the things that I guess it's okay to talk about. Can we talk about the Midwest Sportsman's Classic that's getting planned? We're talking about, obviously your consultant gigs, and then we just found out this week that both Don and I will be doing Chasing Giants podcast live from Shipshewana, Indiana in February. I hope things are back to normal with trade shows and everything. I know ATA got canceled already, but we'll start telling everybody where we're going to be out because just after that sportsman show in Shipshewana, you're going to start your master classes on your home property.
Yeah, the master courses are actually going to be in March.
The next month, yeah.
Yeah. The first week in March is the Iowa Deer Classic, which I'm speaking at. And then the next 3 Saturdays after that will be the master course. I had a lot of interest in that. In fact, I had a group call that wanted a discount. And I said, well, you get limited to 20 people per event. You get 20 people, and we'll just have a course just for your group. It won't even be anybody but your group. So
yeah.
I think there's going to be an extra class just for that group. And I'm throwing that out there. If there's any QDMA organizations or whatever that are interested, I'm willing to do a master course just for your group. If you can come up with the 20 people and give you a good discount on price. I told these folks half price for the attendees.
Wow.
if I can do it on a weekday.
Gotcha.
It's just a whole lot. My Saturdays are just so full, and
Yep. Well,
it's a whole lot easier on a weekday.
I wasn't even going to bring this up, but you actually mentioned it in one of your rut reports. The attendees for this master class actually get to see a spot that you've talked about since last winter, saying that you're going to take your farm up a notch and make it even better. And they're going to see that project and how it evolved from last year all the way into right now, where you shot Mel and Steve shot that giant body buck earlier this week. So you actually get to see that in person. So this property, a property as good as what yours is, you said you were going to take it to the next level, and they get to see that project in person.
And there's a handful of things, Terry, that we're going to see that were not shown on previous courses just because of the work that I was able to do this year with COVID shutting things down. I got about 2 years worth of work this spring, what I normally would do. And also with the weather, we had a late spring. So I got a lot done this year, and we got some more things to see this year than what we've had in the past.
Right. So check out HigginsOutdoors.com to learn more about the master class. The only other thing that we got going on is the giveaway for that master class.
Right. We're going to give away a free attendance for one person at each of the 3 classes. Starting around Thanksgiving, each time Terry and I have a podcast, we're going to announce one more winner. So make sure you like the Higgins Outdoors Facebook page and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you'll be qualified for that free admission to the master course.
All right. Well, with that, why don't we move on to the Biofarm.com property of the week?
Biofarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
All righty. This week's featured property is 55 acres in Pulaski County, Illinois. The property is less than 3/4 of a mile from the Ohio River at Grand Chain, Illinois. There's like 24, almost 25 acres in cropland, CRP that's overgrown with brush. So there is some CRP payment there, but also that second growth brush is fantastic wildlife habitat. The balance of the property is wooded. There's a building site. There's a 42 by 64 foot pole barn. It's got the living quarters, makes a great hunting cabin. 2 ponds on the property. Series of trails that have been mowed in the past that could be maintained or not. There's rural water supplied by Fort Masac Water Company on the property. Taxes are only $1,456 a year. All the mineral rights go with the property. And you know what I think is awesome about this listing? I looked it over in detail before the podcast this evening, and 55 acres, you've got a cabin, basically a pole building with living quarters, but it's all got a concrete floor, and it's under $200,000. It's like $180,000.
Wow.
That you can have a hunting property and you've already got your cabin and everything on it. So it looks like a heck of a bargain. Cheap taxes, CRP income on top of that. All the mineral rights are there. If you're interested, call Agent Wayne Keller. Wayne's phone number is 618-407-1679, or just go to the Biofarm.com website and look for 55 acres in Pulaski County, Illinois. But you're going to have a hard time finding a better bargain than this.
Yeah, it sounds really good, especially when you don't have to worry about hauling a camper down there, or staying in a hotel, or anything like that. You start hunting day one. All your money goes into whatever you want to do with land management projects. So it seems like a good deal. So I want to thank Biofarm for their support of the podcast. Please go like their Facebook page and visit their website, biofarm.com, to check out this property in Pulaski County, Illinois, right off the Ohio River. So seems like a good one.
Well, I guess we're ready for submitted questions, Terry.
Submitted questions. Please look at my aerial photo and tell me how I should hunt it or what food plots.
There you go.
I'm a little sarcastic tonight. Sorry about that. Kevin Thayer just posted a picture saying he was selling Terry Pier special edition wire tie camera mounts.
Well, at least he's not selling Terry Pier love swings.
Yeah, there you go. What's our first question for tonight?
Garrett McBride from Lakeville, Indiana, sends the first question. Says, thank you for taking the time to read my question, and thank you for such a great, informative, and real-world view on hunting and life topics. I own 20 acres that I have been working on improving, and every time I'm sitting in the stand, I see more work that needs to be done to help screen my property from neighbor activity, which I believe is what my property needs the most. I have access to multiple other hunting properties where there are good deer, but currently no shooters that I would consider. What are your thoughts on bailing on the season on my home farm and get started on the work needed? Will that just have an effect this year, or could it affect next year's hunting as well? There's a lot more that can be done in 5 months versus 3 months, but I don't want to have a long-term negative effect on having that kind of intrusion on a 20-acre property. Well, Garrett, my first question would be to you, is there a target buck on your 20 acres right now? If there's a buck that you want to kill there, I would suggest that you spend your time trying to kill that buck rather than starting your habitat project. What you're going to find, what I've found, is the habitat work never ends. You got a list of projects you think you want to do, and you'll be done with the property, and you get those done, and you'll be sitting there in your tree stand, and you'll be looking around, and you'll think, man, if I just did that, it'd be a little bit better. If I would do this, it'd be a little bit better. And it seems like every year I end up with a list of projects that just never end. So if you've got a target buck, I would continue to hunt the property and save that habitat work till after season. Now, if there's not a target buck there, I would go ahead and get it done, and I wouldn't be too worried about the effect you're going to have on the property in the future. Your habitat improvements should negate any negative aspect of you chasing the deer off here during season. They'll find those pockets of safety and security cover once they're created. So I wouldn't be too worried about that.
Sounds like a plan to me.
You good with that, Terry?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what. I mean, he's saying he needs screens. I'm not sure what he's going to be able to do during hunting season that helps with that, unless he's cutting trees down or doing dozer work or something like that. So, I mean, it really just depends on what kind of projects he's doing. But I agree with you. If there's a buck he would consider shooting, hunt, enjoy it.
Absolutely.
All right.
So we're going to move on. And Terry, I picked this question just for you.
Uh-oh. Does it have to do with wire ties?
No, but it's a controversial one that you and I are probably going to have a different opinion on. But it kind of goes back to the whole thing on the bad shot angles, too, at least from my perspective. And I know
is it a broadhead question?
It's a broadhead question. I want to. This question comes from Calvin Hurtis from Noble, Illinois, and Calvin just bought a 360 hunting blind from me. And he left 2 camouflage caps for us, and I forgot to give you yours over the weekend. It was sitting there on my desk in the shed.
I'll see you this week.
Yeah. So that cap I'm going to give you comes from Calvin here.
Right, well, thank you, Calvin.
Don and Terry, love the podcast. Very informative. Don, I've heard you talk briefly about broadheads and that you prefer fixed blades. I was wondering why. I'm just going to make it very simple. I think a mechanical head is an opportunity for failure. A fixed blade head, in my opinion, there's just a whole lot less opportunity for that broadhead to fail. And simple, my equipment is pretty darn simple. If you ever seen the sight on my bow, you'll get the idea in a hurry. It's pretty crude. I'm all about simple. I'm telling you, when carbon arrows came out, I bet you it took me at least 10 years to even consider using a carbon arrow. I remember when releases came out, it took me at least 10 years before I ever strapped a release on.
And he's still using the same release since.
Change. What's that?
And you're still using the same release since.
Yeah, then that's absolutely true. That is absolutely true. I'm still using the same release that I started with all those years ago. I just don't embrace change. I don't. Mechanical broadheads to me is just an opportunity for something to go wrong that you don't. It's a chance you don't need to take. And I know Terry used them. And I'm going to tell you, I've had this season already, I've had 7 different bow hunters on my property, hunting on my property, and some of them have used mechanical heads. There's been a variety of equipment. It's not my place to tell other people what to use. I don't look at somebody's equipment and look down on them. I don't tell them you can't hunt my farm if you're using that. But that is my opinion on mechanical broadheads. And Terry, now you can roast me.
Well, that's not. I mean, let's call it like it is. I've heard you say that mechanical broadheads should be outlawed. I mean, that's how you're being a little bit conservative with your answer. And I'm going to say that even though we disagree, we actually agree more than we disagree on this, because I'm sitting here in my trophy room downstairs looking at a Matthews Triax on the wall, and it has Slick Trick 4-blade fixed broadheads in it. I believe 100% that out of a compound bow, that a fixed blade broadhead is better. And if do you want me to actually say why?
Yeah.
I think the accuracy that you have, no matter how good of a shot, there's a lot of things that can happen in the amount of time, even at 15, 20, 25, 30 yards with a compound bow. The deer ducks, it's a little bit further back, not getting a complete pass-through. You hit that opposite side shoulder. That open broadhead is going to, no matter at what angle, you're always going to cut. With some of the mechanical broadheads, you'll actually, at real steep angles, if that thing deploys or the blade moves around, depending on the design of it, it can actually even kick your arrow. If you don't get the full, I mean, everybody talks about, look at the holes that I can stick 4 fingers in. Yes, that's a perfectly placed shot through, the rib cage and double lunging it. We're talking about the shots that are not as desirable. You basically have a straight in, and if heaven forbid that arrow pull back out, you basically have a puncture wound. If that happens with a fixed blade broadhead, you're getting those blades ripping and tearing as it would come back out, or lodged in that opposite side shoulder. So I am a firm believer. I'm sitting here looking at my bow right now. In a compound bow, I was hoping to actually be able to shoot it this year, but with my knee blowing up, I wasn't able to get there yet. A fixed blade broadhead is my preference. Now, where we're going to deviate, in our opinion, is on the crossbow side, which you even are somewhat against crossbows for people who aren't disabled. With a crossbow, it is so fast and so accurate. If I can be disciplined enough to shoot the shot, then I'm not going to shoot straight down through it, through the back. I do use a mechanical broadhead on a crossbow. Because of how fast it shoots and how accurate it shoots. I believe that I'm good enough with the piece of equipment that I can control and get better results with it. So partially we agree, but I do deviate from Don's opinion when it goes into the crossbow equipment.
There's the 2 opinions on broadheads.
But if you really ask Don off the air, he'll say mechanical broadheads should be outlawed.
I'll say it right here on the air. I do think they should be outlawed, but they're not outlawed, so I don't know that it's my place to go around trying to police the bow hunters,
Yeah, I mean, it gets into...
I can get off on a real tangent here if I want.
There's more you can kill a deer with a field point, but we all know
if you hit them in the right spot.
Yeah, if we all know that bow hunting, there's just so many factors. It's like Alan Foster said, it's not supposed to be easy, right? So whatever you're doing, whether it's picking out your tree stand or whatever equipment that you're using, you're trying to minimize the things that could potentially go wrong that cost you that animal.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in the cases of this, I do think that it's subjective, that you're opening. It's another variable. That why do you want to have that variable? And people, I don't buy it that you can't get a fixed blade broadhead to fly as good as a mechanical. I just don't buy it in a compound bow. In a crossbow, I'll argue it a little bit, but in a compound bow, I don't see it. Maybe it's the people that are wanting to shoot a deer with a bow at 80 yards. I don't know. That gets back to what you were talking about earlier with getting them close.
Yeah.
So
I was going to get off on a side tangent here, but we got another question, so I think I'll save that that one. I might make a note and talk about it next time. It's a little bit about equipment. It's more about manufacturers, but
there you go.
I'll save it. That'll be it on the broadhead.
Thanks for the hats and the question, Calvin.
Yeah, we're going to move on. Next question comes from Dylan Nicely from Monticello, Illinois. And Dylan says, "Hey, Don, big fan of your Facebook page as well as the podcast. My question is regarding the number of mature bucks a property will hold during the fall. I find your property interesting in that it sets apart from the rest, meaning that there are several acres in between whitetail habitat. You've talked about the number of bucks on your property each fall, and how you even choose to cull some out. Are you seeing these bucks being tolerant to one another when breeding is occurring? From my personal experience, I watch a number of bucks every year spend their summers together, but in fall it seems each one of them have their own particular range. In the area I hunt in central Illinois, it seems as if they don't really tolerate each other even before breeding takes place and once they lose their velvet. I know each property is different, but how are you able to hold so many different bucks each fall? Thanks again and keep up the good work." Well, Dylan, without a doubt, you got to look at a mature buck's number one desire. And his number one desire is to be free of human intrusion. He wants security. And if your property is the most secure property in the area, well, the deer will pile in there. And that includes mature bucks. And that's exactly what I've created. They know the pecking order. Saturday, whenever I was hunting with my son-in-law, Corey, we had two different bucks that were 3.5 years old come by at the same time, both resident bucks that spend a lot of time on the property. They came by the blind we was in at the same time, and one looked at the other and turned his head and laid his ears back in that real aggressive posture, and the other buck just walked away. They know which one's dominant. It's no different than a bunch of kids going to school, but the time they get in the third grade, they know who the tough kids are and who the weak ones are, and the weak ones know not to mess with the tough kids. And they know the different personalities, and this kid, you don't mouth off to him at all. You might get punched in the nose. And the other kid, you can do whatever you want to him, and there's going to be no consequences. And bucks have different personalities like that as well, but they recognize it. They know each other's personalities. They know which ones are more dominant, and they work it out. I think some of it probably on my property has to do with the layout as you described. My property is kind of isolated in a sea of open ag fields. So, if a buck's not spending time on my place, and I got a lot of does here too, so that brings a lot of bucks, but if a buck's not spending his daylight hours on my place, his next option may be a mile away across open ag country. So he wants to be close to them does, and they're a social animal. You see them all go out and feed in a field in the evening together. Some more social than others, but I'm easily able to hold these bucks here multiple bucks during the breeding season without any problem. Now, with that said, there are some bucks whose personality, they're more loners, and they don't want a part of it. They don't want to be here with all those others, but there's plenty of them that do tolerate it. You got anything to add, Terry, from your observations hunting here?
I think if you have cover, you have food, you have does, and you're disciplined enough not to pressure it, you'll have more bucks than you can even think that it's possible to have. So our buck's going to go and leave and come back? Absolutely. We're not hunting high fences here. But if you give that, we keep using this analogy of a checkerboard and make your square of the checkerboard different than all the other squares around it, and give a deer what it needs, and then be disciplined enough not to pressure it. That's the reason I didn't go hunting today. I know that it's getting surrounded and hunted with rifle season going on. Use that and don't pressure it. Be disciplined, and I think you'll be surprised at how many more bucks you can hold.
Yep, for sure. It's all about pressure.
Yes, sir. Well, that's 3 questions for tonight. I actually saw earlier today that you announced for our listeners your plan for the Mel video. So for the podcast listeners that maybe didn't see social media yet, why don't you kind of go through that plan for everybody?
Yeah, Steve Shields is working on the Mel video, and he's told me he's putting a lot of extra time and effort into this one compared to the YouTube videos he's done. He wants it to be really special, and it's a really interesting story. Mel is the first buck that I've ever shot that I've watched grow up since he was a yearling. Now, there's a lot of bucks that I've got history with and multiple years of history, but Mel is the first one that I've got history since he was a yearling. And I got a shed antler from him as a yearling, got a shed antler as a 2-year-old, and both of them when he was 3. There's going to be some people that are going to say that Mel is older than what I'm saying he is. I'm saying he's only 4 when I shot him, and that when I passed him at 3, he was over 200 inches. And there's people already questioning a 3-year-old, a wild 3-year-old that scores 200 inches, but I'm telling you it happened. I'm 100% convinced, and with the history that's going to be shown in this video. But this video is going to come out on Thanksgiving Day is the goal, to release that on Thanksgiving Day. You'll need to go to my YouTube channel. If you go there and subscribe ahead of time, and you'll be notified when a new video is released. And when that video comes out, you'll be notified to already be a subscriber of the channel, but look for that on Thanksgiving Day.
I want to clarify something. If
Okay.
if somebody wants to complain and argue about you passing a 216-inch deer while I was setting 6 inches from you, videoing you, and all they have to complain about and argue about is whether or not he was 4.5 or 5.5, you just go ahead and send that message to me, because you're missing the point of the entire story. I'm getting ready to go off again. But people, come on. We're talking about not just one picture, not just one sighting, but what he knows happened with this deer. And you all have 0.5% of the information and want to argue. So for those of you who want to argue this, I'm going to relieve Don from the obligation of getting all the hate mail on this one. And if you have a question about whether Mel was a 4.5-year-old or a 5.5-year-old, based on the stuff that Don's published, which is a small portion of what you're going to see in the video, just go ahead and send those messages to me, and I'll start the dialogue with you. Because I'm kind of wound up right now anyway, so I'll take.
I got my own bodyguard now, folks.
I'll take that one for you, because good grief, people, you're missing the entire point. The guy passed a 216-inch deer on video and had him set underneath of us for 20-some minutes, and you never even once thought about grabbing your bow. And good grief. right, I'll shut up now.
Well, you know what, Terry? Now that you're wound up, these people that want to say it was a pin deer, I get a little bit of that local.
Oh,
I don't get so much from, the national audience, or if you will, but there's a few local haters that, Don shot another pet deer, another pin deer. I promise you, I've never shot a single pin deer in my life, folks, but people want to say that, so hey, it is what it is.
It is what it is. I'm happy for you. I questioned you when you decided to do it. I still think you're the craziest deer hunter I ever know. I've ever been around to pass I don't care how old he is, a 216-inch deer, and then take a nap after you shoot him instead of going down and get it. Crazy. But yeah, I mean, come on, people. That's, I don't know if it's just jealousy or hatred, or the YouTube should be called You Should instead of YouTube. It's like Mike Morgan from Outdoors with the Morgan said. It's just people. There's no better place for you to get people to tell you how to spend your money than social media and YouTube. So,
yep.
So I'm looking forward to it. I haven't even seen the footage yet. So I did get to see Hold Mel's rack. I guess it was Friday night this week, and went down to the house for dinner Friday night, and I got to sit there and hold it. So pretty impressive. I'm not gonna lie. It's a special animal. Handed it to my 15-year-old son. What did I ask him? I said, my 15-year-old son's holding this 220-inch rack, and said, would you shoot that one? And I think he said, well, no, not here, because I wouldn't be allowed to shoot it if it was here. And Don said, you're right.
Perfect answer.
He's allowed to come back now, right?
Yep, for sure.
All right. Well, I'll contain myself the rest of the night. So, but want to remind everybody the best place to keep up with Don and the Rut Report coming still through the rest of this month is going to be Facebook, but also watch his Instagram. And then the next video is going to be a Mel produced by Steve Shields, released on Thanksgiving. So be sure you check that out.
Yep.
All right.
Appreciate everyone's support. And, we get off on little tangents, but in the grand scheme of things, Terry, it's a very, very small percentage of people, really, because you've probably seen the post I made last night, and nothing but, there's probably 100 positive comments there, not a single negative. It's probably pushing 1,000 likes. And, we've got a whole lot more good people supporting what we do than we have negative people complaining. So we want to focus on that and just thank everyone for their support.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, if you got any prayer requests or anything, questions about the Lord, please reach out to us. If we can't answer it, we'll put you in touch with somebody who can. But thanks for the support, and appreciate everyone listening to episode 37. Please share this with your friends. Leave a comment ranking on your podcast platform. That helps other people be able to find it. And do me a favor, go out and subscribe to Chasing Giants with Higgins Outdoors YouTube channel. The more subscriptions and the more comments and interactions that you leave on that Facebook page, that YouTube page, that does all the analytics and actually recommends these videos for people out looking for this type of content. So the more you help with subscribing, liking, commenting, we appreciate that very, very much. So thanks for all the support. Don will take us out with our sponsors.
All right, we want to thank our sponsors, Biofarm.com, 360 Hunting Blinds, Quiet Cat Bikes, Real World Wildlife Products, Vortex Optics, Lone Wolf Tree Stands, and Matthews Archery. Appreciate everyone tuning in. See you next time. Be safe out there.